The 5 priorities in the document are: number 1, truth, reconciliation, and healing for First Nations and all Canadians. The revelation of the unmarked grave sites of our little ones across this country has heightened the awareness of Canadians regarding the genocide that occurred and the healing that needs to be done. We will be calling for strong action on this issue as part of the healing path forward. We, at the very outset, require the establishment of a healing foundation for survivors and intergenerational survivors. The second priority is climate and conservation leadership with First Nations. As we emerge from the current pandemic, Canada's priority attention must return to addressing climate change, biodiversity loss, and its structural drivers in order to rebalance the relationship with all of creation. As record heat waves and wildfires have devastated Canada, it is clear that there is no more pressing issue for all of humanity. In 2019, chiefs from across Canada recognized this issue, working together to declare a First Nations climate emergency. The healing path forward means developing an AFN national climate strategy that will ensure that First Nations governance, laws, and priorities breathe life into a Government of Canada climate plan, committing to positioning Indigenous climate leadership as a cornerstone of a strengthened climate plan. The third priority is economic growth, prosperity, and wealth building for First Nations. The AFN continues to advocate for economic stimulus support for First Nations businesses and flexibility for the First Nations labor market. We need to establish a national First Nations economic growth, prosperity, and wealth building table between First Nations and our federal partners. The economic impacts of the pandemic were devastating for many First Nations. Already, we were among the most vulnerable and were particularly hard hit. The healing path forward means sustained investments are needed to support growth and sustainability. As businesses continue to adapt to the changing economic landscape, they need to access affordable and reliable broadband. This will be vital. First Nation governments require the fiscal capacity to improve the quality of programs and services to their citizens, to improve governance systems that help to ensure the most effective use of the fiscal capacity that does exist, and to make socioeconomic outcomes more equitable between First Nation citizens and the others in Canada. The fourth priority is promoting peace by respecting First Nations sovereignty and jurisdiction. At the heart of every conflict involving First Nations is our land rights and title, our water rights, and our inherent and treaty rights. These rights must be respected, implemented, and honored by all levels of government. This is the legacy of colonialism and paternalism historically exercised by the Government of Canada. Within Canada's economy, conflict has eroded investor confidence and led to many lost opportunities. For First Nations, conflict too has meant the loss of hope and certainly opportunities to First Nations as well. The healing path forward means it is time that promises to First Nations were made concrete through the commitments to recognize, respect, and promote justice, equity, and equality for First Nation citizens, both within Canada's legal framework and through the recognition of our own natural and inherent laws. We also see that we need to see through promises to First Nations that will lessen these conflicts, restore investor confidence, and brighten Canada's economic future. The fifth pillar and the fifth priority is rebuilding and strengthening First Nations. The Healing Path Forward means that Canada must confirm its commitment to redesign its legal framework whereby First Nations governments can exercise their sovereignty and jurisdiction over programs and services offered to their citizens. In 2019, legislation on Indigenous languages and on child and family well-being were the first bills to formally recognize First Nations jurisdiction on those specific subject matters. The pandemic has made it evident that First Nations need more control over their health care to better serve our populations and to eliminate the systemic racism facing our peoples within the medical system. Most recently, legislation to implement the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples recognizes a wide variety of First Nations jurisdictions and relationships. We will expect the next federal government to work with First Nations to enable them to take up all of these jurisdictions to occupy the field that they wish to exercise. Well, we have to talk about it. That's the bottom line. Over the next few years, we will find more and more of these unmarked graves. This is an ongoing concern for First Nations. The fact that we're not talking about it every day in the media is not of great concern to me, as long as the dialogue is ongoing, that we are talking about the recovery of our little ones, that we are continuing to look at the funding that was announced before the election, the $321 million, as an investment in that process in terms of healing from the recovery of our children and what our survivors are going through right now. I believe that the path forward has already been set before the election, and that we will continue to pursue that and make sure that there is justice for our children. The AFN Executive Committee will make a decision very soon on whether the AFN attends that meeting. But I want you to know that I will not be there because I know that we need to press the Catholic Church to come, or the Pope to come to Canada. And the process of inviting him, I would say we're still working on that. But we've been very public that we want the Pope here in Canada to offer that apology on Canadian soil. I can only speak from my own perspective as national chief that I will not endorse any candidates because I have to remain neutral. I have to work with whatever party is elected. So I'm not going to endorse any candidates myself. I can't speak for other leaders. What I do want to say is that there are many Indigenous people running across Canada. And I do want to wish all of the Indigenous First Nation candidates the absolute best in this election, in their run. And at the same time, that's for any party, no matter who they are. I think it's important that Indigenous candidates are running, but as I said, I can't endorse any particular party or any particular individual because we have to remain neutral.